back to the channel. I'm going to ask you something. If you do not want to see a video with a political debate, please stop watching it now. Well, you have kept watching the video. So, like I'm from Brazil, I think I have the obligation to tell you what's happening here. And what's happening here is a state coup. Basically that, where a elected and legitimate president is being taken off office by a bunch of corrupt people with many crimes that have no legitimacy at all. Well, how can that happen? First of all, before I start telling you why, I want to leave very clear that I have no prejudice or rancor or hard feelings against any North American citizen or against any people who calls themselves Americans, being born in the US or not. What I have is a prejudice against the government of the United States and the CIA. They gave the coup here in Brazil in 1964, and there are plenty of proof of that. And they did the same just yesterday, now in 2016. And why? Well, first of all, because we now in Brazil have huge oil and gas reserves. And our pre-salt oil reserve, for example, can run the entire world for 5 years. Its value, it's about $17 trillion. If you used to read the newspaper in the United States, for example, you know the United States owes internationally about $17 trillion. Fishy, huh? Also, Brazil has a lead position in South America, like the Mercosur. And Brazil is also part of the BRICS group that is composed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So the name BRICS. And the BRICS group is defying the United States sovereignty over the world, let's say, and has even created a bank that is an alternative to the US-controlled International Monetary Fund. And that pisses the US government off a lot. So we are pro-Russia, or were pro-Russia, and against the international policy of the United States. And that was just inadmissible. So, the real plan started in 2013 when American agents came to Brazil and founded and trained a group called the Black Blocs that started massive protests against the world coup and against what they said was the high cost of transportation in the state of São Paulo. A thing that's not our federal government's fault. Many manuals of training in English were found, and some were pictured and shown on Facebook, and the pictures disappeared. You can't find them anymore. So these groups were basically CIA trained, and that started. The other measurements that the CIA was doing was controlling the entire media in Brazil, because the entire media in Brazil is controlled by 6 families, and those 6 families are all pro-USA, pro-government of the USA. So the media lied and is lying today, every single day, about the government, and the media has been used by the CIA to create a crisis in Brazil that is fake. They created the crisis. The media, the Brazilian media, created the crisis to invent or to create a reason for the people to hate the president. Well, like our President Dilma respects democracy above all things, she did nothing about it. And she should have, but she didn't. Another way of attack of the CIA was to create and to train a brigade of agents. Those agents were not Americans, they were Brazilians, and they are Brazilians, and they are here betraying their country for money. Among them, you can say the names of a few, but I will tell just one that most Brazilians will understand, and its name is Sergio Moro. That's a judge that is responsible for the Lava Jato operation. That's been a scheme to put the guilt on and to imprison exclusively politicians that are of the same party as our President Dilma. And that's what we call a selective justice, because even though other parties are the vast majority of the involved in corruption, they are not under arrest. They are not. Not even one. Not even one was arrested. Only politicians that are part of the PT, that is the party of our president, were arrested. And even without proof, just based on testimony, they were arrested. And even with equal testimony involving politicians from the parties DAM, PSDB, and PMDB, and PP, and many others, well, those were never arrested. In fact, one of the most corrupt people in Brazil, Mr. Eduardo Cunha, of the PMDB, was until the beginning of this week, he was the president of our Congress. Yeah, a very corrupt man with bank accounts overseas, evasion of funds, accused with proof of receiving bribes, and even the Swiss government has proofs against him. But he was kept in place because he was against President Dilma. everybody was kept in place and never arrested because they were against President Dilma. Mr. Cunha was just taken off office after he had already done what CIA wanted him to do. So, the impeachment on President Dilma was created by those guys, those agents, paid by the US and trained by the US, based on a lie, on a fake crime. And what was this fake crime? Was a fiscal maneuver that the government Dilma did, and was done before by government Lula, and was done before by the government of Fernando Henrique Cardoso, that is on the opposition, and was done it is being done by many state governments. What was that? Well, here in Brazil we have a lot of fund and money distribution projects that gives access to people with low income to houses. And that's not a rent. They would own the house for less than what they would pay for rent monthly. This is one program. We have many others that help families with low income, like the Bolsa Familia. We have other programs that help people to get into the university, like the FIES, like the Ciências Sem Fronteiras, that sends people to study overseas completely for free. And the President Dilma is also constructing a huge number of federal universities that give the people free college. Well, the money for this has to come out of the government's treasure, that is basically composed by taxes. Those taxes, they come in a specific rhythm. At the beginning of the fiscal year, the government has an estimation of how much it will expend and how much it will get from taxes. So there is a balance, a fiscal balance between what gets in and what gets out. Sometimes what happens is that in a determined period, the government has to expend more money than what the government has. And so, not to stop the social programs, the government uses money from the state banks, like the Caixa Econômica Federal, that's a state bank, or Bank of Brazil, that's a state bank, or BNDES, that is a state bank. And they use that money to keep the programs running, and when the taxes make possible for the government to pay the bank, the government pays the bank. So this postponed in paying the state bank, the bank that the state owns, is what was used as crime against President Dilma and called pedalada fiscal. Well, this is not a crime. And our vice president that is now in power did it many times, and he is not under impeachment. Well, with this fake crime that every single jurist around the world considers a fake crime. That man called Cunha accepted the process on the Brazilian Congress. Remember, Cunha is very corrupt. He was paid to do so, and he accepted the process. Well, most of the congressmen went to the exact same way because they have a lot of tendencies and justice. So, in exchange for pardon, they all voted in favor of this impeachment, and this impeachment passed Congress. When our Supreme Court finally decides to take Cunha out, Cunha gets out of the Congress, and the man, his vice, assumes. The second in power assumes, a man called Maranhão. This man sees that was everything wrong and makes null the impeachment process. Well, on the same day, at night, he goes backwards and said, well, let it go ahead. He did that because he and his family would be killed if he didn't do that. And that's a fact. So the man did that to save his family. He is a coward. Yes, he is a coward, and did that to save his family. He has no empathy, but he did that. On the very next day, the impeachment went to our Senate, where the corruption is again the main factor among the senators, and they voted yes to the impeachment, to basically not to go to jail, because the government Dilma was trying hard and harder to arrest the real corrupt, and this was not happening. But they wanted to grant it, that it would never happen. So what they did was to impeach President Dilma with a fake crime, so they would never go to jail. And if you remember that very corrupt guy called Cunha, well, he was deposed from his presidency on the Congress, but he is still at large. He was not arrested. If he were a politician of the PT, he would be in jail since about 2013. But what can we do? Our judiciary and our legislative were all bought and paid by the CIA to depose Dilma. Our vice president, a man called Temer, that is from the PMDB, the same party as Cunha, is involved in corruption. He was delated by a man in the Lava Jato operation. He has offshore accounts, and he signed decrees like the pedaladas they used to depose Dilma. But he is now in government. And what happened basically was that a woman without a single corruption accusation against her was taken from power by a bunch of corrupt people paid by the United States government through the CIA to put corrupt puppets into her place. So in the next months and in the next years, the US will have full access to Brazilian oil reserves and undermine the BRICS group internationally. Democracy in Brazil is dead because with the President Dilma impeachment, even though the process is not over yet, she was just taken off office for 180 days to defend herself on the Congress. Remember the Congress, the same bunch of thieves that voted against her in the first place. So, even though the process is not over, we can consider it over. And democracy is dead in Brazil because a precedent, a very dangerous precedent, was introduced into the Brazilian politics. You don't have anymore to have a crime to be arrested and to be taken off office. So, if ever again a progressist candidate wins the election here in Brazil, he or she can be impeached without crime by the corrupts every single time. The people will ever have voice again. The people, of course, has a part of the guilt because even though they voted for President Dilma, they also voted for those corrupt individuals that impeached her. And only if the people massively decides not to vote for them anymore and only vote for progressist candidates, the thing can have a different outcome. But even though our judiciary system is still bought and is still dominated by the Freemasons that are vassals of the US. They do only what the US wants them to do. So justice in Brazil is partial. It has only one culprit that is always the same, even though the culprit committed no crime. Thus, we are now in an extreme right dictatorship. I have a side myself. My side is the extreme left. I'm a communist and I'm a member of the Brazilian party, Communist Party, the PCdoB, Communist Party of Brazil. And we were on President Dilma's side and on the democracy's side since the beginning. And we are seeing things that can only be described as a dictatorship of extreme right happening now in Brazil. Every single media effort is against President Dilma and in favor of the corrupt individuals that basically did the coup. Now, we are again under a dictatorship, and yes, we can be called a banana republic because the Brazilian citizens that accepted money to sell their country made us into that. And May God have mercy of us, because I don't know for how long people like me and people like the thousands of the supporters of the government will be left free. You know, on an extreme right dictatorship, one thing that happens is fascism. Just look at Ukraine. Fascism, like Comrade Lenin said, is capitalism in decay. Well, an extreme right dictatorship is capitalism in decay, and that always ends in fascism. And if you want a taste of Brazilian fascism, Google the name of a guy called Jair Bolsonaro. That is a fascist. And that guy doesn't deserve the title of human being. Thanks for watching, guys.